Hey everyone, Mychal A. Bryan here from the Oraculos School of Astrology, and today we're going to talk about Neptune ingressing into Aries. As many of you know, I'm both a traditional astrologer as well as a Uranian astrologer. And so Neptune ingressing into Aries isn't as meaningful to me from a zodiac-based perspective. Rather, it's meaningful to me from the perspective of Neptune ingressing into a cardinal sign. So that's the angle I want to take this from today, because we have a lot being said at the moment about Neptune entering a fire sign or Neptune entering Aries specifically. But this idea of Neptune crossing the cardinal axis is something that we really haven't heard as much about. The cardinal axis is 0 degrees of the 4 cardinal signs. So, from a Uranian astrology perspective, 0 degrees Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn are all very potent as far as cardinality is concerned, because that entire cross is known as the world axis. The reason why 0 degrees of the 4 cardinal signs is known as the world axis is because this is something that we all share in common. When a planet within our charts is natally standing on the cardinal axis, that planet is given an extra amount of emphasis within our lives, as if that planet were angular within our charts. And as we know, angularity equals visibility. Therefore, when we refer to a planet being on the cardinal axis, we're saying that that planet is extraordinarily emphasized, not just within our personal lives, but also within the world at large. Now, natally speaking, this makes far more sense when referring to the traditional planets of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, or the Moon. And if a person were to have any of those 7 planets present on the cardinal axis within their birth chart, I would interpret that as being specifically significant within the context of their lives. However, if a person has Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Chiron, or whoever standing on the cardinal axis within their birth chart, I don't interpret that as being personally significant, because those planets aren't personally significant within themselves unless they are doing extraordinary things to more personal planets within our chart. However, when we're referring to a mundane chart, or even to a mundane event in general, the modern planet standing on the cardinal axis is something that should be noted. Now, as we know, Neptune symbolizes disappointment. In a very real way, Neptune is the very antithesis of everything that Saturn represents. If Saturn represents creation, Neptune represents deterioration. If Saturn represents stability, Neptune represents confusion. If Saturn represents establishing a firm life within the world, Neptune causes us to have neither a sense of direction nor a center of gravity. Neptune represents the very manifestation of all that we consider to be confusing within the world. And when the world is passing through a highly Neptunian period, the world itself seems as if it's lost its true north. And that is something that we are finding with this Neptune ingressing into Aries. Not so much because the Aries specifically is giving us that information, but because Neptune standing on the cardinal axis is giving us that information. Neptune standing on the cardinal axis says to all of us that at this time, as we move into this new year, but also as we move into this new era, more and more of us are going to feel this internal sense of us having lost our center. And there are 2 sides to this, because on the one hand, when we lose our center individually, it gives us the extraordinary opportunity to go out and find who we're meant to be. It gives us the extraordinary opportunity to paint a new vision of the world, to paint a new vision of ourselves within the world, and to completely step forward into a space of recreating ourselves. One of the things that's interesting about Neptune is that Neptune has to do with idealism. And this relationship between disappointment and idealism that we find within Neptune is very critical in terms of us understanding how this planet manifests. Because very often when we find ourselves under the baleful rays of Neptune, we find ourselves being dreamers in a way that has no practical connection to the realities of life as we know it. And as a result of that, when those dreams don't manifest as we expect for them to, we oftentimes do find ourselves with a deep sense of disillusionment, disappointment, and a general sense of being let down by life and by the people within it. So this theme of disappointment, but on a global scale, is something that we can expect with this Neptune ingressing into Aries. And one of the ways how that shows up is by us realizing that we don't actually have the sort of support from those in high places as we might have initially expected. And when that happens, it causes all of us within ourselves, as the people who constitute the nations that these people in high places rule, it causes us to individually wonder, what is the role that we play, not just within this country, but also within the world at large? And it also causes us to question our own level of personal significance, but also our own level of personal power to affect the changes that we want to see within the world around us. So this Neptune crossing the cardinal axis is a bit tricky because it does reference, or it does refer to us entering a period of disappointment on a global scale. And that disappointment can really be rooted in the fact that we realize that we really haven't been recipients of truth. And the reason why I say we haven't been recipients of truth is because when we look at this Aries ingress of Neptune on the 90-degree dial, we notice that Mercury is standing very close to Neptune. And in this chart, we have Mercury at 29 degrees Pisces, 42 minutes retrograde, and we also have Neptune standing at 0 degrees Aries. So essentially, we're entering this period of Neptune in Aries with Mercury conjunct Neptune. And Mercury conjunct Neptune has to do with dreams and illusions and fantasies. And it has to do with people who have the ability to weave a brilliant story and to create a whole new world completely in their mind and bring other people into that story and into that narrative to share in that experience of that world with them, which is wonderful. If we're speaking about somebody creating a theme park, it's a completely different thing when we're referring to people lying to us. And it's a completely different thing when we're referring to people intentionally not being honest with us, but those lies not even having the gravitas necessary for them to stand the test of time. And as we look at this Neptune ingressing into Aries chart, we're seeing that the lies that we're being told do not have the ability to stand the test of time. And not only are we having the wool pulled over our eyes in a sense, but we're also in that same moment realizing that it's happening. Because that's another element of Mercury Neptune. This sense that we're being lied to, but also the sense that we realize and that we understand that we're being lied to. So Mercury Neptune represents disappointment, but more than disappointment, it represents a coming back to reality. And so as we move into this era of Neptune ingressing into Cardinal Aries, it's also bringing with it this sense of us coming back to reality and really questioning ourselves regarding what the reality of our lives actually is. Now, when we go back to the 90-degree dial, we find that there are some other planets that are tied in with this Neptune as it stands on the cardinal axis. We find Saturn. Having Saturn in relationship with the Neptune is saying that we are essentially under the influences of not just Neptune, but also Saturn. And once again, like I said, Neptune is the absolute antithesis of everything that Saturn represents. One of the cards that I'm reminded of in the Kabbalistic Tarot when I think about Saturn and Neptune as a conjunction is the Eight of Cups. And in that card, the Eight of Cups, which is astrologically associated with Saturn in Pisces, and which also bears the esoteric name, the Lord of Abandoned Success, what we find in the Rider-Waite rendition of that card is a man who has turned his back on everything that he's built and everything that he's established for his life, because he realizes that even within all that he has gained for himself, there is still the seed of emptiness present within those things. And more importantly than there being the seed of emptiness present within those things, there's a seed of emptiness present within himself. And as a result of that, even though he has all of the trappings of what should be a good life, he knows that he still has to go out into the world to truly discover not only who he is, but also discover what his specific purpose is within this lifetime. And so this period of time of having the Neptune ingress into Aries can represent a major moment of collective disillusionment, in which we all take a look at the trappings of the material things that we have within our lives, and we realize that none of those things is really valuable at the end of the day when we consider what life is actually all about. And so as we move into this period of having Neptune ingress into Aries, we might all feel a deep sense of soul hunger. We might all feel a deep sense of soul yearning, where we realize that the material trappings of this world don't actually exist in the very core of who we are as spiritual beings within this lifetime. And I think that this is also connected to the fact that earlier within our Aries ingress of the sun chart, we saw that there was this huge emphasis on financial disillusionment and on financial instability, particularly within this year of 2025. So as we, as the human collective, stand and look at a world that's crumbling beneath our feet, as we, as the human collective, stand and look at an economy that's crumbling right before our eyes, it causes a reckoning within ourselves that causes us to question what is the real value of life. And when we lean into this question of what is the real value of life, it catalyzes a momentum within us that causes us to go out into the world and find those answers. And that is what we can look forward to as we move into this period of having Neptune ingress into Aries. We find on the one hand a deep sense of disillusionment, a deep sense of coming to terms, a deep sense of waking up, a deep sense of realizing that the things that we thought were real really aren't real, a deep sense of coming to realize that the things that we thought should hold us when the you-know-what hits the fan really doesn't have the ability to hold us in a way that can stabilize us when the proverbial shit hits the fan. And so as a result of all of that, this Neptune ingressing into Aries forces us to find within ourselves and to fund within ourselves a sense of personal embodiment and a sense of self-knowledge that cannot be broken, because we're moving into an era where we realize that the ways in which the world has been built up around us, all of those ways of falling apart, all of those ways of breaking apart, the world around us is in an active state of deterioration. Saturn-Neptune represents an active state of deterioration of the material realm in which we live. So as we find ourselves moving into this period where the real estate doesn't work, the money doesn't work, the leadership doesn't work, our idea of nationalism doesn't work, as we find ourselves moving into these periods of time and into this new era in which all of these things are fading away and crumbling and passing through our fingers like the sands of the desert, we must ask ourselves, what is truly valuable? And so this Neptune ingressing into Aries, on the one hand, it doesn't feel comfortable at all. And it doesn't feel comfortable for a number of reasons. As we look back at the dial, we also notice Mars and Chiron in hard aspect. And this combination of Neptune, Mars, Chiron, Saturn, all of these factors feel like an epidemic. All of these factors feel like sickness. All of these factors feel like a weakened immune system, but on a global scale, where the entire world at large is feeling that much more weakened based on the pathogens around it, based on the assailants around it. So it's something that we all feel in a very serious way, because it's something that's washing up against all of our doorsteps. So in a world where we are looking at these sorts of possibilities, the possibility of a financial recession, the possibility of there being major events that happen on the ground that cause us not to even trust the ground that we're establishing our lives on, the possibility of sickness, the possibility of epidemics, the possibility of us all having a weakened immune response in the light of what is to come, all of these things, it challenges the level with which we build our lives on the physicality of this material world, and it forces us to dig deeper. We're looking at a series of truly unfortunate events, all of which forces us to find and to fund a greater sense of light on life within ourselves. And so as we look at this Neptune ingressing into Aries, it's a challenging one. And it corroborates some of the challenges that we previously saw in our Sun ingressing into Aries video. And if you haven't watched that video, please do give it a watch. Because in the Sun ingressing into Aries video, we saw these same patterns and the shadow of these patterns rising and stepping forward towards the forefront of this year of 2025. And we find these things even further corroborated as we take a look at this Aries ingress chart for Neptune for the year of 2025 as well. Another piece that we notice as we look at the 90-degree dial is that we also have Pluto in relation to where Neptune is. And in the book, The Combination of Stellar Influences, cosmobiologist Reinhold Eberton tells us that Neptune-Pluto corresponds with the treacherously painless stage of disease, and it also corresponds with the lack of incentive or willpower to maintain health. So once again, we find yet another combination that's indicating the possible likelihood of some disease manifesting within the world at large that challenges all of us in a very personal way. And not only do we have that being on the horizon, we also have this idea of that disease being cloaked in invisibility. As we know, Pluto was one of the gods that had a helmet of invisibility, and therefore Pluto had the ability to move amongst people and not be seen. This Neptune-Pluto contact could be indicative of the fact that disease within this coming era has the ability to move amongst people and not be seen, and also not be experienced or even not be felt until it's too late, which is why Reinhold Eberton calls this the treacherously painless stage of a disease. So once again, we find yet another indication that the themes of health and sickness are going to be extraordinary themes, not only as we move into the year of 2025, but also as we move into this era of Neptune being in Aries. Similarly, on the note of the Saturn and Neptune being connected while Neptune is standing on the cardinal axis, this combination of Saturn-Neptune equals Aries corresponds with hysteria in general. So there's a lot going on the ground that's affecting us not only physically, but also affecting us mentally and emotionally and psychologically. And when we find ourselves moving through such a difficult time, when we find the world around us navigating such a difficult moment within our human history, the question naturally becomes, what should we do? And that answer is going to be individual for all of us. And there is no all heal. There is no panacea that can be given to the world at large for all of us to know exactly what we should do to navigate these massive titanic shifts and changes that we find manifesting within the world around us. However, one of the things that I've always found to be useful, particularly in the case of navigating afflictions of Neptune, is to find a way to dig deeper. This is definitely a period of time in which we understand at a visceral level that the only way to get over what we're going through is to pass through what we're going through. And so there are no ways for us to circumvent the challenges that we find ahead, which means the only way for us to actually navigate it is to pass through it, because it is within the process of passing through it that we will accumulate the tools necessary to pass through it even more effectively and even more masterfully. So we do have the Neptune ingressing into Aries. And as it ingresses into Aries, it's doing so with many a challenge. It's doing so with many circumstances that strike a chord of disappointment, depression, anxiety, fear, and an overall sense of us not truly feeling as if we have any real sense of anchoring in anything. Because as the world crumbles around us, it becomes that much more difficult for us to figure out where we are truly meant to anchor our heels. But the message within all of this, and I think the true spiritual core and meaning of everything that's happening, is that when the physical realm around us doesn't have the ability to hold us in the way that we need to be held, we have to find non-tangible things to lean on. And those non-tangible things become our spiritual practice. Those non-tangible things become how we connect with the divine, even outside and beyond of our physical trappings of life. Those non-tangible things become how we communicate with our own sense of the gods or with divinity, so that we can know that our lives and the foundation of our lives is rooted in something far greater than any physical or financial circumstances that we might find ourselves in. So Neptune ingressing into Aries is a period of disillusionment for us all. But out of that disillusionment arises this search and this yearning within ourselves to know ourselves in a deeper way, but also to know the gods in a deeper way as well. And so as we navigate this period of time of Neptune ingressing into Aries, for all of us as an astrological community, but also for all of us as a global community, we are being commanded by the universe to find the universe where it truly exists, and to know that it doesn't exist in our bank books, and it doesn't exist in our 401k, and it doesn't exist in the physical reality of our homes and our cars or our jobs or anything, but it exists deep within each of us as an imprint and as a call for us to return to our spiritual core. And when we return to that spiritual core, not just for 2025, but for this era of Neptune ingressing into Aries to come, when we allow our spirituality to be the head of our lives, then we can truly establish within ourselves a peace that passeth all understanding. And that is the call for each and every one of us within this era of Neptune ingressing into Aries, for us to allow spirituality to direct our efforts, for us to allow our spiritual values to shape and mold the sort of lives that we live and the sort of world that we want to live in, but also to allow ourselves to find a sense of peace without physical attachment. Because when we can truly find and establish that peace within ourselves, then we can truly know what freedom means within this lifetime.